Hi, I'm Rennae Stubbs, and you're listening to the Double Bagel podcast.
Rennae, thanks for your time. Welcome on the show. Now, it's been exactly 20 years since you won the Australian Open doubles and mixed doubles titles. 20 years on, how do you look back on that incredible fortnight for you?
Wow, it's 20 years. That's crazy. Um, I look back, obviously, with incredibly fond memories of that moment. I'd sort of already had a reasonably successful career up until then. But I'd always felt like I was good enough to win a Grand Slam. Sometimes you sort of doubt yourself because that's sort of the pinnacle of your sport, right? And I'd had a tremendous amount of success winning tournaments up until that point, but I hadn't won a slam yet. I'd lost in a final, a bunch of semifinals, quarterfinals. So to finally, have that moment where Lisa and I finally got a Grand Slam under our belt, it was a lot of relief, to be honest. But then also the excitement of it, doing it in Australia was, I don't think I could have scripted it any better. I mean, winning Wimbledon was always a dream, but when you get to win a Grand Slam in front of family and friends like I did, and it was packed, it was a really full house because it was prior to the men's semi-final, and so we had a captivated audience to the end. So yeah, it'll be a day I'll never forget.
I mean, you're more known for your doubles achievements in tennis, 6 doubles, Grand Slams, and world number 1 in doubles. But how would you describe your singles career?
I would describe my singles career as frustrating. Obviously got to, I think it was 62 was my highest ranking, or 64, I'm not quite sure. But I had really started to come into my own in my singles career in 1997, when I started working really, really hard with my coach, with a personal coach. I sort of didn't really have a full-time coach prior to that. And it's expensive to have a coach and to pay them weekly and fly them places. And I wasn't getting any support from Tennis Australia at that point. So it was really up to me. And, it's a tough decision to make for a player, is the money you're making, that I was making quite good money at that point in doubles, but to put it into a coach and then to have, you're always worried about your future. So it was a bit of a juxtaposition of, hiring somebody. And then, but I did, I finally bought a house in Florida, and I started working with my coach that ended up being my coach for a number of years, and Ray Ruffles. At that period of time, I started to really climb up the rankings. I started understanding how to play singles better. And I know that sounds silly, but to me, doubles just came so naturally that I didn't have to really get coached in how to play doubles. But in singles, I had to really be a lot more patient. I had to work a lot harder on the practice court, and therefore, that translated into my singles having more success and getting into all the Grand Slams. And then I hurt my wrist at the end of 97, I think it was. And that put me out of the game for 7 months. I couldn't play at all. And so my ranking dropped substantially. And then when I finally was able to come back and play, doubles came so naturally to me that I think I may have even made the semis or final of my first doubles tournament that I played. I can't remember exactly, but doubles came easily and I was having success immediately. But then getting back into the singles swing, and my ranking then had dropped to 200. It was really difficult to come back to play singles at a successful level, because I was doing so well in doubles and making doubles semis and finals and winning tournaments. I couldn't make the qualifying of the next week. So it was a matter of, do I pay the bills, or do I try and, get my singles ranking back, which I did a few times. I went to challenges and various things on my weeks off, but it was a bear to be able to have to do that. So it wasn't until about 2000 that I quit playing singles. And that's really where I had most of my success in doubles from then on, because I concentrated just on doubles. But I'd say it was a frustrating time in my singles, and it's probably the only thing I regret is that, that injury really curtailed, my success in singles, but still I'll take my career.
I mean, you mentioned that Tennis Australia not being able to help you financially. Why was that?
After a period of time, they sort of let you go. They sort of set you free. And I was at an age there where they kind of just didn't really want to support me anymore. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And, it's unfortunate. We had some programs at the time that that were paying for some of our coaching bills and various things. But that sort of stopped, and they started looking at maybe the next generation. I don't know. But yeah, I don't think that would happen now. I think that Tennis Australia is definitely a lot more supportive of players well into their late 20s. As long as, and I was giving back partial payments of my prize money actually to just even to support what the Tennis Australia program was earlier on. So yeah, it was a little disappointing, but in the end, something that it may have propelled me to do better, because I didn't feel like I had the support of my national government, my national, Tennis Australia. So I don't know. I look back and I think it would have been nice, but at the same time, maybe it propelled me to do even bigger things.
I mean, looking back now, is there anything you could have done or would have done to better your singles career?
Yeah, I think I would have definitely, I would have focused in on it a lot earlier. I don't even know how to describe it. It's hard for me to really go back to those early years. And I was trying, I just didn't have the support that I needed. And I didn't have the right people around me to sort of guide me in a way that made me feel like I could really play at a level that I could have. So I think just having a full-time coach a little bit more around me at that period of time, and also having somebody that really believed in me, I think was super important. And then when I started working with Ray again, he knew me from the Australian Institute of Sport days because he was the head coach there. And he really, when I had him start working with me, he really believed in me, and that really helped me. So I think, advice that I could give anyone that has kids that are sort of transitioning out of juniors and going into the pro is to really have somebody around them that really truly believes in them and can bring out the best in them. And I needed that around me, and I didn't really have it. So I was kind of winging it on my own. And I wish I could go back to that stage and say, look, let's really put the hard work in now and see and reap the benefits of the singles. And I think maybe just the doubles came so easily to me. I didn't really have to focus on it that much. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say a regret, but I would do a few things differently. And one of them would have been having the right people around me earlier.
I mean, talking about your doubles career, one of your most longest and most successful doubles partnership was with Lisa Raymond, who was not only your partner on the court, but also off the court. Was that the secret that made the team so successful?
No, I'd say that made it 10 times harder. No, yeah, I mean, obviously we were each other's best friends. So we wanted to definitely win for one another. And maybe that was one of the secret sources to our success, is that, we cared so much for one another. We wanted to have that success with each other and give each other that moment that brought so much joy to us individually, but also, as a partnership, is that we were celebrating something that meant so much to us individually, but yet at the same time meant so much to us as a partnership. And so, yeah, I mean, those are memories that it's hard to describe how much that meant to us in general. So we were each other's best friends. So to see each other so happy was, it meant the world to both of us. It was difficult in a lot of ways, obviously, because you don't like to mix business with pleasure. But at the same time, I think we probably went to bat for one another probably stronger than we would have maybe if we didn't have that relationship. But it was complicated in some respects, but also incredibly rewarding.
I mean, you've also had to play against Lisa on multiple occasions. How difficult is it to play against her, considering you knew her so well, both professionally and personally?
Yeah, it was always really hard to play against one another, especially when we were done with our partnership and our doubles partnership and everything. And but we're still each other's best friends. That was really difficult. I won't lie. It was probably the hardest thing that I have. I never woke up in the morning knowing I had to play Lisa and was super excited about it. It was always very daunting, very difficult to know that one of us was going to lose. Was never fun. And, we sort of felt responsible for, again, as I said, for making each other a little sad that day. So never easy. It's never easy to play against a friend, but especially someone that I was so close to and had such success with. Those are not my funnest days on the tennis court.
I mean, what caused the end of the doubles partnership with Lisa? Was it mutual?
Yeah, it was just time had run out on, and everything in general. We had played together for 7 years, 6.5 years at that point, and we just sort of felt like we probably needed to move on. So yeah, but it was not easy because really at that stage, it was sort of more just everything was breaking up at that stage. So it was just hard to keep the professional part of it separate. But yeah, that was not an easy transition out of that partnership in all respects, because we were having so much success still at that point. We'd won, I think, something like 16 doubles tournaments in 2 years. So it was kind of unheard of how well we were doing. And then just to sort of have it dissipate was not easy on either of us.
And you repartnered with each other in 2010, was it?
Yeah. So in 2010, we played together in 2005. That was probably my, if there's any decision in my career as far as picking doubles partners concerned, that was probably my biggest mistake. Lisa and I were starting to talk in 2004 at the beginning of the year about possibly playing again together. And we just probably felt like we hadn't had the success with anybody else that we had together. So I had started playing that year in 2004 with Cara Black, and we weren't having the success. And we won a couple of tournaments, but we weren't having the success that quite frankly, used to having, which was win multiple doubles titles that year, in a year. And so I had spoken to Lisa prior to Wimbledon about playing the following year together, and we had agreed that we would play the following year together, but that we would finish the year out with our current partners, doubles partners. And then Cara and I went and won Wimbledon the next week, literally the week after Lisa and I decided to play the following year. And I'm kind of a person of my word. And when Cara and I won the doubles in 2004, I was probably starting to think that maybe that wasn't the right decision to start playing with Lisa again the next year. But you have to understand, we had won 32 tournaments at that point. So I felt we could still have that same success. So Cara and I ended up winning Wimbledon, and then we won multiple tournaments at the end of the year, and we were starting to become a really good team. And but yet I told Cara at the end of the year, after winning I think 3 tournaments back to back, that I was going to start playing with Lisa again. And Lisa and I won a tournament the next year, but we didn't have the success again that we were used to having. And so we broke up again after Wimbledon. She started playing with Sam, and then I actually started playing with Cara again. Yeah. Because Cara's partner at the time had injured herself badly, that wouldn't be able to play for the rest of the year. So Cara and I hooked up and started playing doubles again together. And I think we won our first tournament we played together. But if I could go back to, mid 2004, I probably would not have played with Lisa again the next year. I think I would have run out my career, hopefully, with Cara. And I've told Cara that. It's probably the worst decision I ever made. In my professional career, was to stop playing with her in 2004. At the beginning of 2005, because Cara and I were a very, very good team together, which we ended up playing together for another couple of years, Cara and I, from that mid 2005 standpoint on. But yeah, I probably would have not have chosen to do that. But then Lisa and I did get together back played a full year in 2010, and that was kind of like our swan song together. Yeah. We won a tournament together in Eastbourne, which I think I made 9 finals there, so it was inevitable I was going to win a lot of those tournaments. Yeah, Lisa and I made the championships that year, and it was kind of a full circle moment that we had to finish our careers together. We made a semi of a Grand Slam together. So wasn't as good a success as we had earlier. The magic sauce had already run out, I think, at that point. But yeah, it was nice to at least finish a year at the championships with her.
You talked about being partners with Cara Black. I was wondering, what differences does Cara and Lisa bring on the court?
Well, I think the reason that we had success together, me with Cara and me with Lisa, is that I was kind of always the captain of the team. I was sort of the more energy-driven partner of the team, and I was always very strategic. I could see patterns, and I could see, it's what can make me makes me a decent coach, is that I could really see patterns. I could see what people can and could not do on the court, and hopefully we could take advantage of that as a team. Not to say that Lisa and Cara weren't good strategic partners as well. It's just that I was a little bit more vocal, which I know is hard for people to see as a joke. But Cara and Lisa were both very quiet. And so we kind of had the yin to each other's yang. We could, I could bring them up emotionally and they could bring me down, you know, with my temper or with my aggressiveness on the court. They could kind of even me out and I could bring them up. So I think that's why we worked really well as partnerships, is because we kind of complemented each other really well. Obviously, Cara and Lisa were two of my, you know, two players that could play as equally well as me at the net. So it was very hard to get the ball through us at the net. We were both of them very athletic, not tall, but athletic. I brought the quota of the team up in height because both of them were about 5'4", 5'5". Yeah. But they both did everything so well at the net. They just understood the game of doubles so well. They understood the angles. Cara was probably a little bit better at naturally playing at the net than Lisa was, but Lisa's volleys were just second to none. So yeah, I mean, I think that we just complemented each other of how athletic we were and how well we could play at the net.
I mean, what other highlights in both your singles and doubles career come to mind?
Oh, well, I think I think one of the first things that comes to mind is obviously winning first couple of like just challenger tournaments and singles. But I think the big one for me was qualifying for my first Wimbledon in '89. I'll never forget that moment as long as I live. Like I hit a forehand volley into the open court after a serve and volley to qualify for Wimbledon. That was a moment that just I'll never forget. Being able to walk through the gates of Wimbledon for the first time was pretty amazing. So I'd say that in my singles career, I mean, obviously I had some really good wins as well, but that's a moment that I'll just never forget. I played on Rod Laver Arena against Lindsay Davenport, took her to a really tight nets, which, you know, meant a lot to me to have that moment on Rod Laver as a singles player. And then obviously winning all my Grand Slams, you know, whether it was at Australian Open or Wimbledon, the US Open, they all mean so much to me. It's kind of like picking a favorite child. Can't really do it. But the first one obviously meant the world to me. And then thinking that I could be a Wimbledon champion one day was something that I dreamt about. And when it actually happened was pretty surreal.
What about your first title in Osaka?
Yes, my first title. I'm glad that you brought that up, actually. Yeah, that obviously was monumental in my career, really. A funny story about that, the week before in Tokyo, I played against Helena Suková and I had no intention of going to Osaka. I was going to the States after that. And Helena came up to me, approached me in Tokyo and asked me if soon after I had lost to her, she asked me if I wanted to play doubles with her in Osaka. And at that point, you know, Helena was like top 2 or 3 in the world in doubles and was such a star and such a legend of the game. And when she asked me, I actually said no, because I had no intention of going to Osaka, but really the underlying factor was I didn't really want to have that pressure of playing with Helena Suková. So I said, no, I'm not going to Osaka. And then 20 minutes later, I sat in the locker room thinking, why am I saying no to this? This is crazy. So I ran after Helena and I said, Helena, did you find a partner? And she looked at me and she's like, no. It was only 20 minutes later. And I said, okay, I'll go to Osaka with you. And then subsequently that ended up being my first title. So I feel really proud of that moment because I said yes, knowing that, okay, I was playing with a great player, but also knowing that I was the one with the pressure on me, really, because we didn't win. It was always going to be my fault, right? You're just not good enough to win with Helena Suková. You're not good enough to win with anybody. But so I felt like I put myself on the line a little bit there. Looking back on it now, I know I did, and I just got a great opportunity to play with somebody really good. So winning that title was pretty awesome. And that, I think I won another title that year, I believe with Steffi. I think it was that year. And then, I won another tournament with Helena, and then I ended up playing with Laurie McNeil for a few years, and we had quite a good success together.
And was it more happiness or relief when you won Osaka?
Oh God, it was both. It was a combination. It was kind of like how I felt after winning my first Grand Slam. It was like, there was so much pressure I felt to win that tournament with Helena, just because, as I said, if we didn't, and I felt like it was my fault. And then obviously having done it, I just thought, oh, this is awesome. I want to do this again. So I was lucky that I got to do it a few more times after that.
I mean, you've represented Australia 4 times in the Olympics. Tell me about your first Olympic Games, because it's an interesting story.
Wow, my first. Well, there's a lot of parts of that Olympics in Atlanta that I'll want to remember, and some I'll want to forget. But
Yeah.
yeah, I played single. I was in the singles and doubles for that team because that was, I was doing quite well at that point. That was 1996 when I had a really good sort of season in singles. And I lost my first round of singles to Maggie Maleva, who got smacked. She was just really good at the time, top 10 in the world, and really just was too solid for me. And then really my best chance to ever win a medal at the Olympics was probably that year, just because Nicole Bradke and I had won a lot of matches, a lot of big matches in Fed Cup leading into the Olympics. So I felt really confident with Nicole. And I thought we were really a threat in that tournament, actually, to definitely medal. And I got such bad time of the month cramps, period cramps, that it was the first time it happened to me in such a way that it was just debilitating. And they called me to play my match and I couldn't get off the floor. I was so sick. They ended up having to take me to the hospital. So I had to pull out of the doubles there, which, sadly was, if there's one regret in my life, it's definitely that day that I wasn't prepared for that moment a little bit better, which I ended up being prepared for the rest of my career. I was very aware of that needing to not ever happen to me again. So that was a really sad day, not being able to walk on the court there, as I said, because I think that was my best chance to medal was with Nicole. And unfortunately, I didn't get that opportunity. So that was a bummer. I got to do it 3 more times at Olympics, but the Olympics is unique because in doubles, you have to play with somebody from your own country. And I did not play or have success with anybody from my own country. It was always from Cara or Lisa or any number of other doubles partners. And so I never really had that firm doubles relationship with somebody to go out and win a medal. Even though it was like one of the best doubles players in the world, I didn't even get close. And Sam Stosur would have been the next one. And we lost. I mean, every match I lost at the Olympics was very close, except with Alicia. We were just bloody awful together. But she'll be the first to admit it. And we were so good at that point in Athens. She won a bronze medal in singles, and I just come off of winning Wimbledon. So we were super confident in our own selves. But as a doubles pair, we were just woeful. But everybody I lost to ended up winning a silver or a gold. So I was this close. But Sam and I were probably the next, unfortunately, Sam and I played a full year together the next year. If we'd had that year, the year before, we probably would have medaled at the Olympics in Beijing, but we lost a really close match to the team from Spain who ended up getting the silver medal there. So that was probably my next best opportunity. But great memories. The Olympics will always mean so much to me. And for people that say that tennis shouldn't be in the Olympics, you don't know how people in tennis feel about the Olympics, and they covered it as much as anything.
I mean, you ended your playing career in 2011. What moment did you decide to hang up the racket?
It was a bit of a combination of something. I really wanted to settle down. I didn't want to travel as much anymore, and also I had an opportunity to do the television for NBC for the Olympics. I got a call from Molly Solomon, who's head of, she's the head honcho at that covers the Olympics for NBC, and she hires and fires everybody. And she called me to see if I wanted to do the tennis. And I was kind of dabbling with a lot of TV at that point. I still had a ranking high enough to get me into a team. But when she called me to do the TV, I just thought, it's an opportunity I probably shouldn't say no to, because I did want to get into television once I was done playing. And so I said yes. And I remember putting the phone down, and I remember I was in a hotel in Sydney, believe it or not, even though I'm from Sydney, but I was staying in the tournament hotel. And I remember looking up at the roof of the hotel, and I said, well, that's it. I guess I'm retired, because the only reason really for me to play that year was to make the Olympic team. And, once I decided to do the television, well, then my playing career was over. So that was my decision. That's why I stopped.
How did you feel? Was it sadness or?
It's definitely, it took a couple of years of reckoning, really. It took a couple of years for me to feel comfortable about the decision because there were moments, even when I was calling the Olympics for NBC, I thought, God, I'd killed to be out there still. But, you know, because I was just very competitive and I loved to compete and I loved playing for my country. So it was just, it's not an easy decision for anybody to make, but, you know, at that point I was 39, was going on 40. But now you look at people playing into their 40s, playing doubles. I probably could have played another 2 or 3 years at least. I was still in great physical shape at that point. But it was just the understanding that we all have to move on at some point, and I had an opportunity to move forward with television, and so I took that chance. But it was not easy. It took me a couple of years to let it go.
I mean, you talked about your television job, and part of the job is to the on-court interviews. Personally, who's been your most favorite or memorable on-court interview so far?
Yeah, I get asked this question quite a bit. Listen, I think the most memorable sort of interviews that I've had some really great ones, great fun ones. I'd say the Mariana Lucic interview at the Australian Open, I believe it was 2017.
Yeah.
It was the last time Serena won the Australian Open, so maybe it was 2018. I can't remember. But when Mariana Lucic made the semifinals of the Australian Open, that was probably the most memorable one for me because we had a conversation, and I've known Mariana for 100 years, and I saw her in the locker room in the first week, and I saw that she had a really terrific win in the first round against Wang Qiang, who, you know, as we all know, has had a really great career since as well. But she had beaten her, I think it was 6-4 in the third the night before, and I happened to be watching a friend on the court next door at the time. And I remember turning around and seeing Mariana just battling out there at like 8 p.m. at night, and nobody watching. And I thought, wow, Mariana Lucic is just battling still out here. I just love to see it. Anyway, I saw her the next day in the locker room. And she said to me, I said to her, well done yesterday. She said, oh, thanks. She goes, you know, that's the first match I've won here in 19 years. Yeah. And I was like, are you joking? And she goes, no. And I mean, because my head could not compute the fact that she hadn't won a match in 19 years at the Open. Obviously, she had a sabbatical for about 7 years. But she said, and you know who I beat in that match? And I said, no, you know, thinking it was going to be some great player. Yeah. And she said, it was you. And so I said, wow, you hadn't won a match in 19 years and the last person you beat was me. I feel so great about myself, you know? So as you can imagine, when she had that terrific win over Karolina Pliskova, and I did the match for Channel 7 Australia, I had to go out and interview her after the match, and she was in tears, and it was this very emotional moment. And I don't like to bring up myself in post-match interviews because I just think it's such a wanky thing to do. Yeah. But I couldn't help it because I just knew how much that meant to her. But I don't think people understood the road that she had traveled to get to this moment again, being a semi-final of a Grand Slam. And so when I said at the start, you know, we have this background, and you had told me last week you hadn't won a match here in 19 years, and here you are in the semi-finals, and that win was against me. And we just had this beautiful moment of exchange. And then, of course, she told her story about the difficulties she's had, and she had a moment of crying on the court. And of course, I was crying as well and trying to get myself together. But it was just a moment. It was a personal moment that was played out in front of millions of people. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think personally that meant so much to me. But, you know, I think also the same time when Serena and Venus made the last finals together, and I remember Venus just being so happy and beside herself, and having known those two since they were 10 and 12 years of age, to see them back in a final against one another. Those two back-to-back semi-final interviews with Mariana Lucic losing to Serena. That year was just, I don't know, something about those interviews that I'll always remember. They're not easy, very difficult to do. People think it's easy to do those post-match interviews. You know, I've put my foot in my mouth a couple of times in them. I've forgotten things sometimes. I've been corrected by players. Yeah. And it's never an easy thing to do in front of, as I said, millions of people watching on television. Yeah. But when you get a good one, then it means a lot to you because you've brought joy to that player and to the people that love them.
I mean, the Venus match was against Coco Vandeweghe, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. She'd beaten Coco, I think, 6-4 in the third or 7-5 in the third. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was just her enthusiasm and her
Yeah.
happiness, and seeing this like 37-year-old woman just losing her mind over being in
Just
final
twirling
again. It
around
was
the court.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, the twirling around the court, and
Yeah.
just, she was just so beautiful in her post-match interview. And
Yeah.
Serena was so beautiful that day in her post-match interview, giving, so much credit to Mariana, and also just having the moment of playing her sister. And what we didn't know at the time, obviously, is that Serena was pregnant, standing on that
Oh,
court,
yeah.
knowing going for another Grand Slam. So the emotions that she must have felt and Venus must have felt, knowing that they were going to play each other in, Serena's last Grand Slam final for a little while anyway. Yeah, just amazing to think I was part of that history.
Mm. I mean, in addition to TV, you're also coaching players like Karolina Pliskova and Sam Stosur. How did the coaching role with Karolina come about?
A phone call, basically. I mean, all the players obviously know me from being around the courts for going on close to 30 years now.
Yeah.
So they all, obviously it's hard for me to walk anywhere and now around a tennis event and people not know who I am just because I've been around so long. And so Karolina and I just knew each other from post-match interviews, from, covering tennis, from being on the tour. And I think she liked my commentary, liked what I had to say in commentary. So was probably thinking, oh, maybe I'll have her spend a little time with me. And so she called me on the phone and just asked if I wanted to go to Singapore with her at that point, which was the championships, because she was stopping with her coach. So it was a random thing. Prior to that, I'd done a little coaching with Sam Stosur, Casey Delacroix. So people knew that I was willing to do that. So that's how it came about, really. And then subsequently, the next year, she again got rid of her coach that she was with and called me up again. Would I go to China with her at that point, or actually Cincinnati through Asia again? And I said, sure, I'm free after the US Open from TV, so I'd be happy to do it. And I loved it. It's not an easy job. I can tell people out there, everyone thinks that the coaching job is so easy. They just sit there and make money off their players. But I tell you, it's not. It's stressful. It's hard work. It's a lot of everything that you tell your player. And if it happens and the player does well, you feel a great sense of relief that you've done something really positive for them. But if you don't get it right, there's a lot of pressure on you. How to play a player, what to practice. It's very consuming. It's not a 2-hour job. It's a 24-hour job to make sure that your player is really prepared. So yeah, the Karolina thing came about like that. She wanted to work a little bit more with someone that was a little bit more full-time, and obviously with my TV, it becomes a little difficult. And then now working a little with Jeannie Bouchard and with Sam still. Sam is taking the rest of the year off, so I'm not working with her currently, but I will be at the end of this year and the beginning of next year. And we'll see where it goes with Jeannie, because she knows that I'm working with Sam. So I'm going to have to sort of figure that out with the two of them. But happy to step in and help Jeannie get her ranking back a little bit. And so far, so good.
I mean, you talked about Sam Stosur. What do you think you could add in her game at such a late stage in her career?
Happiness, joy in what she's doing. Looking at every day being joyful on the tennis court. Obviously helping her with the game plans. Doesn't matter how old you are or what you've accomplished, there's always a way to get better as a tennis player. So working on her volleys more, working on, hitting through a forehand again, like slice, improve. Every tennis player, there's not a tennis player that is not working on how to get better. Doesn't matter how good they are. Every day is about getting better. And so for me, it's just, what can we get better at today? And it could be just confidence. It could be hitting your forehand a little bigger. It could be hitting it better down the line. It could be, how can I hit a volley better? So there's not a player today that's not working on every aspect of their game. So for me with Sam, it's that, and also just finding the joy in what she's still doing at her age.
When you talked about working with Jeannie Bouchard, what do you think made her not fulfill her potential in the last few years, and what problems are you trying to address with her?
Well, I mean, listen, I think it's really hard to say, why isn't she, reaching her potential. Look, she got to 4 in the world. I think that's pretty good. No matter what happens for the rest of her career, she made a Wimbledon final and 2 semifinals of other Grand Slams. I think a lot of players would take that career in a heartbeat. So I think, accomplishment done in that aspect. Now it's getting back to the reality of how hard it is to stay at the top of the game.
Yeah.
and she has witnessed how hard it is to stay there. You can have a great year, but people start to figure out how to play you and how to beat you and what your weaknesses are. And I think in that first year when she had that tremendous run, people didn't really know much about her. So it was now people studying her and figuring out how to beat her. And then if you lose a couple of matches, then the doubt comes in, and then you lose your confidence. And it happens to everybody.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of really good tennis players playing the game. So it's figuring out how to beat them. It's figuring out how they're going to beat you and how to get better at what you're doing. And I think with Jeannie, it's just building the confidence back up, telling her how good she is at X, knowing she's got to work on Y. And that's just that progress of getting back to being where she should be, which is without question, she should be top 40 in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. She's good enough to be back in the top 40, top 30, and we'll see from there. And she's starting to get there. She's had some tremendous wins over the last month over some very good players. She came very close to beating Mertens in Prague.
Yeah.
And she came very close to winning another tournament again. So look, bottom line is confidence is building back up. So we'll see where it goes.
Are you traveling with her full time now?
No, again, my television sort of took me away from being with her in Europe when she just had that run at Istanbul because of my ESPN duties. Yeah. But, I'm always on the phone with her. We're always talking or texting. So I'm not going to Paris. She's going to stay over there with Tim, who she works with in Vegas, and he's done a great job. So we just continue to sort of collaborate, and, we'll see where it goes from here.
I mean, what are the differences in coaching like players like Carolina, Sam, and Jeannie, and how are they different as people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Carolina and Jeannie, well, they're all very similar in a lot of ways. Sam sees the cup as half full. Jeannie and Carolina see the cup as half empty. So they are constantly looking at the negative, and I'm having to try and see the positive. Sam sees the positive, and I'm always trying to make her keep believing that. So Sam has a very positive outlook on pretty much anything in general, but she's also really hard on herself. And I will say the three of them are really hard on themselves. But I don't know a tennis player that's not hard on themselves. So I think that's just par for the course. Yeah. All three of them are sponges. I could tell them anything and they'd be willing to try it. They'd be willing to, put it to task and put me to task. And all three of them talk back in a positive way about wanting to know more information. So I've been really lucky that I've worked with three people that I really like. And I think that's super important because I would never work with somebody that I didn't like just because of money. So I think I'd say that, look, they're from three different countries. They've been raised differently. So that also counters into how they are and how they react to things. But I will say that the three of them are really, really want a lot of information. So I think that's where I come in. That's really good for them. And also just seeing the positives in what they're doing. All three of them are really hard on themselves, but they all three work really hard. And I'm really lucky to have had that experience.
Final thoughts, Rennae. Since Roland Garros is next week, what are your predictions for the men's title, I guess, and the women's?
Don't forget the women's, Eric. Yeah. I think that Novak, his confidence has got to be just through the roof. I think he would have learned a very valuable lesson at the US Open. Yeah. But I still think Rafa's the favorite. I think that the French Open over 5 sets on clay, you just got to think that he's always going to be the favorite there until he's got a breath in his body. But I think Novak, and I think Dominic Thiem will be really tough to beat as well. He loves playing on the clay there. He's just won his first Grand Slam. The pressure is technically off of him now of being the best player to never win a slam. And I know the top three weren't there. So he probably feels a little bit pressure to do it with one of them being there. Yeah. But if I had to pick somebody, I'd probably pick Novak just because I think his confidence is so sky high now. Yeah. And I think on the women's side, I think you can't go past Simona Halep. I think she's primed to win this French Open again. She's obviously most comfortable on clay. And I think that she'll be definitely the one to watch. Carolina will be definitely knocking on the door. Obviously, she's a little injured after Rome, so we'll see how she recovers. Yeah. But I'd say Simona and Novak are the two favourites of the French. But isn't it the joy of being able to watch real reality TV and we don't know what's going to happen?
Yeah. Just to add on that, will Serena ever reach number 24?
I really hope so. If she's going to do it, it'll be either at the Australian Open or Wimbledon. Those are her two favourite hunting grounds for Grand Slam titles. But, look, she has to get in a little bit better shape. She'll be the first to admit that, when it comes down to playing 3 sets back to back to back, which she's done way too many times, she has to win matches a lot quicker. If she's going to, when it gets down to quarter, semis and finals, where she's not battling in 3 sets, which she's really had an issue with over the last, certainly over the last few months. But like I said, women's tennis is so deep that so many people can beat her or win the title that it's not going to be that easy. But I pray that it'll happen one day. And if she doesn't do it, her legacy is set as, in my opinion, the best player of all time in women's tennis.